Welcome to the Presence Podcast. In this series, we're going to look at how we can each encounter the presence of God more effectively and how God's presence is always with us.
As a 20-year-old, I was a uni student, working part-time and was involved in ministry at church, and I remember having these regular times of being in God's presence, worshipping and reading my Bible. Some call these quiet times, others may refer to them as a devotional time. Whatever you call it, it is a season of life I look back on with great fondness. It's over 10 years since then, and I find myself desiring to once again have the same experience of God's presence, but I know that life looks different. I now have 3 kids, I'm working, still studying, there's meals to cook, a house to clean, mountains of washing to fold, a bunch of relationships to invest in, and I realise that at some point things changed. Life got full. I still desire to experience God's presence, to hear His voice, but the quiet times are fewer and further between because, let's face it, it rarely seems quiet. And even when I try and spend time getting into God's Word and praying after the kids are in bed, the exhaustion from life has me falling asleep sometimes before it's even started. Last year I was trying to carve out time to read my Bible in the midst of the morning rush and was interrupted multiple times. Once to do my daughter's hair, another time to help my son with his homework, and then again when my 2-year-old spilt milk all over the floor. I said to God, well, at least I tried. And I felt God say, you know it's okay to have a noisy time. And in that moment, I realized that in my desire to have a quiet time, I kept putting it off until the conditions were just right. Yet the conditions were hardly ever right because life looked different now. I felt God say, you can have that same depth of relationship with me as you did in your youth. You just have to learn to worship me. Learn to hear my voice and be in my presence in the midst of the noise and the chaos. So I went on a journey over the next few months of seeking to be still in God's presence and worship in the midst of the chaos that was everyday life. It meant reading my Bible and being okay with getting interrupted. I found myself praying little prayers throughout my day. Some days I'd meditate on just one verse as I went about meetings and commitments. It meant using the already still moments of my day, like driving in the car or taking a shower, and I'd turn my thoughts to God and listen. I'd sing praise. Sometimes I'd just be silent, acknowledging God's presence with me. In the Gospel of Luke, we read in chapter 10 the story of Mary and Martha. And in verse 38 it says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. If you're like me and are constantly distracted by all that needs to be done, and you're worried and upset about many things, well, you know what Martha is talking about. Yet Jesus says to Martha, in the midst of all you have to do, only one thing is needed. It's to be in my presence, to sit at my feet and to worship. So today, if your calendar is full to the brim, if you look at your week and it feels like there's no space, if the thought of having a quiet time is overwhelming, don't wait for the conditions to be just right. Turn your heart and eyes to Jesus in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the busyness, because God desperately wants you to be in His presence. Don't let the day slip by without taking time in and amongst the busyness to worship, to pray, to let God speak to you. Whatever you are in the middle of right now, maybe you're on your morning run, driving to pick the kids up, or you're on your way to work, sitting on the train, take a moment to be in God's presence. Choose a verse to meditate on. Let God know what you are thankful for. Wherever you are, even if the conditions don't feel right, take a moment right now to be in God's presence.
Thanks for joining us today in our Presence podcast. We hope you picked up a thought or an idea that might just help you come a little closer to God and sense His presence in your everyday life.